Today, you are going to get a front row seat to the short but memorable Springbok career of Kaya Malotana. Kaya, welcome to Front Row Rugby.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Pete. It's an honor. I know it's been a while since we've been talking about this meeting, and yeah, I'm glad it's finally happening.
Eventually, we got there, hey? Let's begin by looking at today's trivia question. In 2022, the Springboks lost to Wales for the first time in South Africa. In which city was that match played? Now, if you know the answer to the question, you can put it in the comment section down below, and we'll also find out if Kaya knows the answer, but we'll do that at the end of our conversation. Kaya, I want to begin in 1999. Talk to me about how you were feeling when you found out that you had made the Springbok Rugby World Cup squad.
So the '99 journey of getting to the Springboks actually started with the Tri Nations leg, going to Australia and New Zealand. And there's actually a funny story behind it, because there was a big hoo-ha in the newspapers that new Springbok selection thought it was a joke. And now you must put it into the context of the time, because quota systems and all of that was up in the media. So there were sensitivities around what was happening with Springbok rugby at the time. And so now this headline comes out that I thought it was a joke, because now obviously, sensationalists are going to run with that and upset people at SA Rugby. And but the story behind that is that when I got the call from a journalist at the Daily Dispatch, and he asked me, when you got this call, how did you feel? So I started narrating to him the story that myself, John Bradbrook, if you remember him, the New Zealander, and David Maidza had this running prank about, we would call each other early hours of the morning. Congratulations, mate, you in the squad. So we had this prank running because I think David made the 7 side or had a call up to the 7 side, and John was called to the like SA Barbarian side or something like that. So it was a running prank that, eventually was starting to get stale. So when I got the call, I remember I dropped it. And then the person called again. Then I dropped it. Then the third time, I think I may have said some choice word, thinking that it was John, and I dropped it again. And then I get a phone call from Sid Loubser, who was the general manager of Border Rugby. Sid says, hey, you need to pick up your phone. I'm saying, why? Says, there's a guy who needs to talk to you. There's great news that have just come out. Oh, okay. So the guy calls, I answer. No, well done. You've made the Springbok side. But SA Rugby didn't call me direct to say this is what's happening. It came firstly through the media, which in itself was wrong. But in any case, so he says, so how are you feeling? So I said to him, well, obviously I thought it was a joke because myself, Dave, and John have had this long-running prank, and I thought it was one of those, right? This guy goes and puts the headline, I thought it was a joke. So it started off on that very sensitive note, my involvement at Springbok Rugby. But nonetheless, I was called up to SA Rugby to get a crash course in media training, what to say, what not to say. And then we got together for the Tri Nations, went over to New Zealand, Australia. It wasn't a very happy tour in terms of results. I mean, we took a pounding against the All Blacks at Dunedin, and came back from Tri Nations, went back to playing for Border. And then Nick said, just keep your phones on. We'll be announcing the World Cup squad very soon. And I think I played 3 or 4 games for Border, and then the squad was announced. So, yeah, it was happy days.
That's an incredible story. Kaya, obviously you would have been excited being at the Rugby World Cup, but there is something interesting. I remember a radio interview with Joost van der Westhuizen at the time, who was our captain for that World Cup. And he said that the guys didn't really feel as if they were at a World Cup while they were in Scotland for the pool stage. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the atmosphere was, guys were obviously focused on success. And I think what Nick was able to create was an environment where, we could relax as much as we can. Our preparation for the World Cup had its turbulence, as you will hear from other guys you'll talk to about the '99 group. Gary Teichmann just got unceremoniously dropped after the Tri Nations, so there was that split with senior players that were in Gary's camp that weren't very supportive of where the team was heading leadership wise. And obviously, myself, Wayne Julius just joined in for the whole quota balance, as they were putting it. Luckily, Dion Kaiser, Brayton also already there. So it kind of made our introduction, myself and Wayne, a little easier than what it would have been. So there were all these dynamics that, the guys really needed to relax. I remember we did a lot of off-field activities that were fun. Just to get the guys in a different headspace, I suppose, so that when rugby came, everybody can just remember how fun that would be. So I can understand why you said what he said.
You mentioned a moment ago that Nick Mallett told you to keep your phones on ahead of the Rugby World Cup squad announcement. What did he say to you before he selected you for the very first time to make your Springbok Test debut against Spain?
Yo, do I even remember what chat we had? Because I think at the time, so the nerves I think were gone, and I was just looking forward to getting onto the field and playing. And I think the focus and what he tried to focus on with me was not to let the moment get too big. And then I walk out into the field and, I'm full of mistakes and it all goes pear-shaped. It was all about, you've done so well at border rugby, and I'm just looking for that. And so however you prepare for your games when you played for border, that approach doesn't change. Don't let people make you believe that it is more than what it is. It's obviously a huge honor, and to put on that Springbok jersey, and that in itself has got its own pressure. But if you just go back to your basics and what you do well, and remember that, it should go pretty well.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not consider becoming a patron? It's my dream, guys, to do this full time, and with a small financial contribution, you can help me realize that dream. The link and the QR code is appearing on your screen right now, and I'll also put it down in the description area for you to go and click on at a later stage if you would like to do so. And by becoming a patron, I promise there will be great benefits for members. Now let's get back to the interview. Kaya, your selection in the team was significant because it meant that you would become the first black man to represent the Springboks. How much pressure did you feel yourself?
Man, Pete, I don't think I had the time to feel that moment in its magnitude alone, because politically it was just pressured. It was a time where you were filled with self-doubt in terms of the selection, because everything else about it was, no, it's because you're black. So I had to overcome that mental aspect of the selection, that self-doubt. Am I here because I'm good enough? Am I here because I'm serving a political purpose? It was all of that. And unfortunately for me at the time, I didn't have mentorship, guidance, or even a simple thing like a sports psychologist to help me navigate those waters. And so my dad helped me a lot through that period, because I remember the one conversation I was saying to him, maybe this is not worth it. And so my dad was like, dude, in life, there are pathfinders, there are trailblazers, and there are followers. If you're happy following, by all means, my son, come back home. It's okay. I will still be proud of you anyway. But life is much better if you set the trail for others to follow. and make sure the trail you set is so clear and so good that followers can make something better of it, and that helped me get through that. So I look back at it now and I can be proud, because I think I spent years later in a lot of regrets that I wasn't able to play a second test and a third test and maybe get to 20, get to 30, 40, 50. But it was meant to happen that way, because it's not like I didn't follow up because I suddenly became a bad rugby player. I was just unfortunate with injuries, and I had to deal with that and make a life post rugby, because then my injuries really cut my career short, and I had to figure out my space in this game, post that, and still, you know, contribute, give back, help wherever, I could find myself.
Kaya, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned David Maidza there a little bit earlier, and I remember him as being a speedy winger for Border at the time. But I also remember you being more of a centre. And as I say, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So was it awkward, or how awkward was it for you to make your Springbok debut playing on the wing?
I think making the debut itself, eventually the moment took over, and I just had to enjoy it. I had to be proud of that, and I had to put aside my preference of where to play. And also remember, I was playing in the times of Peter Muller, Jappe Mulder, Henry Leroux, those guys. So wearing the 12th jersey was always going to be, quite a mountain to climb. So I think, when I made the debut, it wasn't an issue, even though my desire was always, in the midfield. Even for Border, when Gert Smal got there, I was between, wing and center, and I always complained to him that I want to wear 12. And he always said to me, I know what's best. So eventually it did work when I look back, because he would start me on the wing. I'd be frustrated out there. I would start getting angry. And then second half, he'd make the change. And by the time I get to midfield, I am so angry that I'm just destroying everything. And it worked for the team. So maybe Gert was wiser than I was.
Maybe. Kaya, tell us the match itself against Spain. How do you remember the experience?
Man, I remember singing the national anthem, and I was looking up to the heavens, and I think in my mind it was that search of, is this really the glory of God? Is this what it's supposed to feel like? Is there a bigger impact to this moment than this moment itself? I wish my parents were here, because my parents didn't travel to the World Cup. So it was a lot of emotion when I was singing the national anthem. That by the time the game started, I really don't even remember the first whistle in that match. But then as the game wears on, I remember the frustration, because a lot of the guys saw the game as an opportunity to fight for spots later on in the World Cup. And I remember conversations around the, dinner tables and lunch tables about breaking the world record score that New Zealand had put in the one World Cup. And, so I think that game was potentially an Achilles tendon for the squad, because it didn't go according to plan. There was a lot of mistakes, stop start, and against a very motivated Spanish side that, not to say they believed they could win, but they believed that they could earn respect against the Springbok side. And so their passion in the game, the pace they wanted to play at, their disruption of everything we tried to do, the intensity they brought to the game also didn't help our cause. So yeah, you walk into your first test and you hope you could score a try. And I don't remember a moment in that game where I actually came close to scoring a try, because it was just a scrappy game.
Kaya, I'd like to talk a little bit about what happened post-match. We know that Springbok players, after they've played their first test for their country, there's an initiation that takes place. It's usually meant to be a fun occasion and a proud moment as well for the player. But something interesting, I read in Tando Manana's autobiography that he mentioned that he felt that the initiation process as a Xhosa man was actually very disrespectful and insulting to him. I wonder if there's anything that you can tell us about that.
It's different, Pete, because I went to boarding school, white boarding school. And so I went to boarding school at St. Andrews College. There were initiation rituals there as a new boy. I went to Queen's College, then where I finished matric. There were initiation rituals there that we had to go through. And with the initiation and becoming part of a culture goes one of two ways. You're either fully in or you're not. If you're fully in, you take it, it becomes a part of your identity once you've done that. And therefore, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, a sense of pride. If you're not in, it's always going to eat at you. There's always something that is going to be degrading, disrespectful, looking down on me, those emotions. And so by the time I got to Springbok Rugby, initiation was just a part of things that I knew happened and things I embraced because you are fully immersed into that culture when you put yourself through that, whether you believe it in the beginning or not. But once you are fully immersed, you are able to earn your spot within the ranks. You are able to earn that trust because rugby is based on trust. You can't play with guys you don't trust. You can't be coached by coaches you don't trust. It's just as simple as that. And so when you go through all of that, all those elements, are now in the pot and you can enjoy, being a part of all of that. So when we got initiated, my initiation, I will always remember for the rest of my life because an incident happened there that could have gone sideways. But if it wasn't for Rassie and Varun Swanepoel, I'm not sure the rest of the World Cup would have gone the way it eventually went for us and to get to third place playoff. But I still, as much as we went to boarding school where there was corporal punishment, and we used to that. So corporal punishment was part of the initiation by the senior players, right? I had Mark Andrews, I had Craner Otto. I just can't remember if the late Ruben Creer was supposed to be the third guy. But each one of them just gives you 2 lashes with a cane, and that's it, right? But I think that guys got to like me so much, especially Craner Otto, because we were always pulling jokes against each other. I remember that year, the Bulls went to East London and lost. So I was always pulling his leg about everything. And so when he hit me, it was kind of soft. I wasn't expecting that, right? And then Mark Andrews came. Now Mark is a border boy, came from Selborne, so there's that connection. So he also just kind of tapped and it was all a big joke. And unfortunately, third person, I can't mention it now because, he's not even living anymore. Grab this thing out of frustration and anger that these guys were making this whole entire thing a joke, right? And you really smashed me with this cane that I lost my balance. So you're supposed to touch your toes when they hit you. And I lost my balance, regained it, looked at him, and I kind of whispered Bluxom because every time you got hit, you had to shout Bluxom, which was Doc Late's, Doc Craven's dog. And I kind of whispered the Bluxom, everybody laughed. So he hit me a second one. I went and sat down. And there was a split second where I could have cried. And had my tears gone down, I think all hell would have broken loose. And so the first person to pick that moment up was Rassie. So he grabs me, puts me next to him. Smiley fetches a beer, says, "Hit it, boy." just down that thing. So I downed the beer and we just laughed afterwards. And the rest, I mean, I was okay after that. I didn't even hold a grudge against it. It was, sometimes initiation goes pear-shaped. Kind of for him, I can't say he's a bad person as a result of how he felt. This is how he felt. And, there should have been sympathy towards it. There should have been understanding before it was done. I think also in those environments, we run the risk of being ignorant to other people's backgrounds and upbringing. And we just assume that everybody knows and understands this, right? You come from a boarding school background. It's okay. It's safe to assume the person understands and accepts. But you have to investigate people's backgrounds first. And then you know how to approach it. And either way you look at it, if there was an opportunity to sit down with them and say, listen, mate, it's Springbok rugby. This is your path in. This is your way of being accepted in the fold. This is a way of becoming part of the culture. It may have gone slightly different. Or there would have been acceptance that, okay, guys, he doesn't want to be, a part of the initiation process, which guaranteed there's going to be guys in the group who are not going to trust him, who are not going to respect him because we suffer together. Now I know Pete's character and what he's capable of producing in the dark hours, right? But if you refuse to suffer next to me, I don't know what it's going to take for you to break. And therefore, why must I walk into this war with you?
It's very, very interesting. Kai, thank you for sharing all of that with us. Tell me, what can you tell us about Nick Mallett as a coach, as you experienced him?
I think I didn't really get to experience the coaching team on a very deep and profound level because I was a newbie, and I was young. I was that Bobby Skinstead, Robbie Fleck age, where we were just the kids that nobody bothered. If we went out, nobody knew, except when they could see the hangover the next morning. And so I never, unfortunately, experienced that deeper connection and therefore learn some profound lessons from Nick. I think it's now years that I'm working with him at SuperSport that I'm starting to get a deeper understanding of the person, the man. And so coaching wise, Nick just wanted you to bring your 100%. Don't expect favors. I think how he dealt with the entire quota system um, is that he just refused to give it airtime, refused to engage in conversations about there must be two on the field and two on the off the field. And he focused more on the balance of the side, what would be the strongest team. And so the selections of Brady, selections of Dion were always on merit because those two were playing the best rugby of their life. In any World Cup competition, everybody must get a chance. And so as a coach, you have to balance which games where once it's all said and done, everybody has had their 80 minutes. And so for us, it was the Spanish game and the Uruguay game where he could then get everybody on the park and then decide from there how to go forward into the knockout stages. And so I think today I still respect that he didn't have to deal with the situation he was maybe not strong in dealing with, and therefore end up making promises and lies, trying to deal with the situation as best he could. He just focused on the group and how and what would make us strong and what would give everybody a chance to play, and then we can give ourselves a great chance of winning the World Cup. I still maintain if it wasn't for Stephen Larkham's drop goal, first drop goal of his rugby playing career. So, I mean, up until that stage, I don't even think he knew how to spell drop goal. I still believe we would have gone back to back. I don't see us losing in that final that Australia played against France. I really don't.
It would have been a wonderful thing for us to have been able to achieve, but as we now know, history tells us otherwise. Kai, just a quick one. There are many kids in South Africa that grow up dreaming of becoming a Springbok. And I've said this before, I think that they think that if they do become Springboks, they'll play for 5 years, 10 years, play 100 test matches like Percy Montgomery did. But maybe, like in your case, it might only be one test match. What's your advice to those kids?
Professional sport is exciting, but very unfair. It's a real slap on the face and a real wake-up call in different ways for each individual. And when the roller coaster of all these exciting emotions and excitement of being selected, and once that thing has left the station, as a young kid, there's no room to think of what if. There's no room to think of adversity. There's no room to think, what if today is the last day of it? You are immersed in that emotion. You are immersed in the dream of how big it's going to get. You see the cars you're going to be driving, the places you're going to be living in, where you're going to be holidaying, who's going to be on the arm. It's all of that in your mind. And the last thing is seeing yourself on the operating table with the doctor telling you afterwards that this is it. And so it is very important that in forming or entertaining the dream of Springbok rugby, also entertain the dream of life without Springbok rugby. That is important, to start visualizing that. It's important to imagine how to use the platform, Springbok rugby, or even franchise rugby, because it's good earnings. How do you use that platform to set up the life without that platform? Because ultimately, this is where you're going to end up. A lot of kids starting out don't even see that far, whether because they're ignorant and naive, or they're not getting the right advice and people pointing out the important things in life. But it's very, very important that it becomes part of the conversation while they're still climbing the ladder, while they're still making those steps. It becomes important for the support structure around them to keep that message alive, that, listen, boy, you break an ankle walking down these stairs on your way to practice. What happens? And they need to be forced to listen to that conversation. They need to be forced to entertain and think and imagine and start making plans for what happens there. Because I think I was lucky that when my final operation on my knee happened, I was in an environment that was willing to give me an opportunity into another sphere of rugby, which was coaching. So I got injured playing for the Leopards in Potchefstroom. Andre Margraft was still in charge of the Leopards and Griquas. And he facilitated my move from the Lions to the Leopards. And so I got into the university. It was still Buck then, so I'm struggling to call it Eagles, but yeah, I need to respect that it's changed names and it's now Eagles. So I went there to play rugby for the Leopards, play rugby for the university, and then they absorbed me into coaching when that injury happened. And luckily, the coaching passion was always there. And so it was a lucky door opening for me to walk into something that I was already passionate about.
Tell us, Kaya, who was your toughest opponent?
I had two guys I hated playing against, but the one more so. And the late Anton, was it Anton Porter? Etienne Porter. He played at the Bulls, from Falcons to Bulls. I hated playing against the guy because he had a size I couldn't control, right? Because he wasn't that much bigger than me, slightly bigger, very powerfully built, very strong runner. So I always hated, having to defend him, because he didn't need to start at depth to get that kind of momentum he needed. because he was so powerful. He could take off in a small space and would generate so much momentum that it becomes an absolute nightmare to defend him, right? And it's one of those players that would have been a Springbok if tragedy hadn't struck. And I always sometimes when I think back on hard games I've had, I'll always think of him. The other one was Fabian Jury's father, because Fabian would put our entire defensive backline into a spin because we don't know what he's going to do. And so every planning we have is how from the midfield we need to defend in such a way that we're going to help our wing defend against this guy. And now you end up having to worry about what's happening on the outside, and then you forget that you still have your own opponent to worry about. And so it was always a nightmare like that. So those two guys I enjoyed playing against, but yeah, they were Faber for his trickiness, but Etienne just for just toughness and power. I prefer the bigger guys, to be honest, because you just get to the ankles and you're up on the floor competing for the ball. They were the easiest to defend against.
Very good information that. Kaya, when you look around today, is there a current player that you admire?
There's so much at the moment. We watch so much of it, right? That everybody presents their different skills. So for me, you look at a combination of Ron Janssen van Rensburg with Andre Esterhuizen, for example. If you could merge those attributes, physically, because they're both physical beings. Ron Janssen van Rensburg, the more explosive off the mark, but very poor ball control in contact. Andre just bulldoze. He's a bulldozer. He will move you from here to 20 meters post where you may touch, And so in terms of ball carry, those are the two that I quite enjoy. In terms of skill, obviously Cheslin. I mean, he's amazing. How, Curtly Irons is now coming up is amazing for me. Kanan Moody is still going to develop into a full package, and he just has the physical attributes to become one of the world's greats. So on the international scene, there's just so many, But I'm old school. I'm still the Dan Carter era, the Johnny Wilkinson era, those kind of players. I think Aaron Smith became my favorite as well in just how he revolutionized just playing that position, scrum off. As much as I enjoyed the likes of Forey, Dupree, but there's something Aaron just made out of playing 9 that I see an Anton Dupont doing the same with that position now, but he hasn't reached the legacy, the legend that Aaron was able to achieve, playing number 9 for the All Blacks.
Kaya, at the beginning of our discussion, you shared that prank with the likes of David Maidza, which was quite funny, about being called up to the Springboks. I wonder, is there a particularly funny moment that you can share with us from your time with the Springboks?
It was so short-lived, that I didn't even get pranked much, and I didn't get to perform pranks. But the most joyful part about my being there was the time spent with the late Ruben Creer. We spent a lot of time just chatting, me and him, and not a talker, or kept to himself a lot of the time. And I could see with the rest of the guys as well that he didn't speak much to the guys. He kept to himself, but amazingly he always had time for me and just to chat about life, chat about rugby. And so that was awesome. I think my relationships with the likes of Craner Otto was quite nice for me. I don't know if the other thing about it is that for me, I remember it because I was a youngster in the system, and then I didn't get to last in the system. Maybe because they played far longer. created more relationships as they went along that they won't remember it exactly as I do remember it. But my friendship with Crane was awesome for me. Mark Andrews, but Mark, I feel like he was family because of the border connection, so he made life easy. I enjoyed the relationship between Mark Andrews and Henry Honeywell. And so I always try to spend time with the two of them because you have never heard banter Pete to this level. Henry being the quiet guy, minding his business, could never rest when Mark was around because Mark always found something to banter with. I remember the one banter they were having. Mark had just acquired a farm, and now he's telling Henry about how a better farmer he is than Henry. And Henry had this slow tone of talking. And he goes, "Ah, man, Mark, you call climbing on your quad bike farming, you must get a horse, man." So it was that kind of relationship that I enjoyed very much. And then also Smiley and Rassie, they were very close when they played Springbok rugby. So somehow the two of them accepted me into that two-man circle. And so I quite enjoyed that. And then the one that was easy and that was just there was Bobby and Robbie. Because Bobby, we came through the junior Springbok ranks together. He was always my captain. And he was big mates with Flecky. So it was kind of an easy transition into that relationship. And John Kaiser Brayton, we had a great relationship as well. I remember, here's one. The Tri Nations. Now we get to Australia. To cope with the travel, we have to use sleeping tablets along the way, right? So we can try to regulate the bodies, get used to the hours and that kind of stuff. So we get to Australia, and I'm sharing a room with Dion Kaiser. Now we can't sleep. And it's going to midnight, it's midnight, it's 1:45. And we look at each other like, dude, we are going to be so stuffed at practice. Let's try to get some sleep. And Dion says, okay, luckily I took a few sleeping tablets from Doc. So let's pop these things, set the alarm, we're good to go. Fine, pop the pills, sleep, phone rings, front desk. Bus has left you guys, you need to get to practice. Drop the phone, think it's a prank. I'm so unlucky with this kind of pranks. So we think it's a prank, we drop the phone, right? And I think 10 minutes later, this lady calls again. Gentlemen, team managers is called to check if you're up. You need to get to practice. And I think, okay, I get up, open the curtains, and it's broad daylight outside, Pete. My heart just sank all the way to my ankles. I'm like, Dion, we are in so much trouble, buddy. Let's go. So we get up, get our stuff, ran to practice. It must have been between 5 and 8Ks that we ran to get to practice. Get to practice. Nick just points us in a direction to go join practice. We practice get done. And then Wayne Diesel was the conditioning coach. So I know it was Kevin from the Sharks. How can I forget Kev's surname? I'll think of it now, but he sends us to Kev for our punishment afterwards. And so we do extra running. Luckily, the bus waited for us to finish our extra running, and then we got on the bus. And by all intents and purposes, we believe the incident is dealt with. It's done. Nick asked, we explained to him, okay, fine, guys. It's done and dusted. The following morning, at around 4 a.m., Dion's wife calls. And she says, what Kaya, what Makela do it? So he says, what do you mean? Says it's all over the papers here that you guys are on strike. Really? Apparently, you guys chose to run to practice because you didn't want to climb on the same bus as everybody. And it's a whole big thing here back at home. Fuck, dude, we took sleeping tablets, we overslept, and then we ran to practice. There's nothing, there is no story. And you're like, oh, okay, now I understand. But yeah, in South Africa, you guys are on strike. So it just shows you the sensitivities around that time.
Quite unreal. Kaya, you mentioned earlier that you do work at Supersport. We've seen that, those of us who watch and watch closely. What else are you up to these days?
Well, Pete, my heart has always remained very close in the development and assistance of communities and kids that are otherwise struggling. So I'm always out there, with fundraising for initiatives. Currently, I'm doing one for education for Queenstown schools, where we're riding from Joburg to Queenstown on bicycles, 850 Ks, to raise money, to support schools in the Queenstown area. I'm currently working with the church foundation to help at local schools of kids that come from townships like Alexandra, those kind of townships. So working with those kids, to help with social development, social behaviors, but using sport as a vehicle to get through to them. There's one that I'm busy working to put together for the villages back at home. So that's a space that interests me more, man, because I really enjoy helping other people. I think growing up in a village and making it out of a village and thinking of all my mates I was growing up with in that village and how much better skill-wise they were than me, but they just didn't have the opportunities I had. I think that's what keeps my fire going, man, to see if another child who is like one of those friends I had, could get the opportunity and they could be the second person out of my village to wear the Springbok jersey because I'm still the only one.
Sounds good to me. Kaya, we're going to finish off by looking at that trivia question again. In 2022, the Springboks lost to Wales for the first time in South Africa. In which city was that match played? Do you know the answer, Kaya?
I think this is a city where the Springboks were hosted by the people of the city. Drank a little too much brandewyn because it's on tap in that city. It's Bloemfontein, isn't it?
It is Bloemfontein. That's quite right. It's actually not as bad as people make it out to be there. I've been there a few times.
No, it's actually a very wonderful place to be.
It really is. I've actually got family there. It really is. It can be a lot of fun actually. Kaya, let me say it was lovely having you on Front Row Rugby today. An absolute pleasure to listen to those old stories from the late 90s, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future.
No, awesome, and thanks, Pete. I'm glad we've finally made this happen, and good luck with this podcast as well. It's a really awesome initiative, and may you grow from strength to strength, my friend. And we'll catch up in the future, definitely, because we're still gonna win the World Cup again a third time. We're still gonna win the Champions Trophy with our franchises and URC. So there's still a lot of rugby to come.
Last time on Front Row Rugby, Justin Swart was my guest. You can go and watch that video. It's appearing on your screen right now. Next time, 2007 Rugby World Cup champion BJ Botha will be here.